something different tonight. You obviously know Jeffrey Tucker. He comes on the show so often. And every single time Jeffrey Tucker gets done on the show, have a talk with the producers, and we always say, "Well, we should have gone longer. We need to get him for longer." And so we're going to keep him the whole hour this time. And we're just going to pick his brain a bit. So joining me now, somebody you know quite well, Jeffrey A. Tucker, president of the Brownstone Institute. And he wrote a wonderful book called Spirits of America. You want to fill yourself up with patriotism, remind you where you came from. I would highly recommend it. Read it to your kids, by the way. Jeffrey, you and we connected back during the COVID insanity. And I know maybe I'm supposed to move on, but I haven't moved on. I can't understand totally how the land of the free succumbed the way it did. Can you help me understand what happened?
Well, I'm just glad you're asking the question because everybody else seems to pretend like nothing happened and that nobody should be shocked by this.
Yeah.
I'm dealing with crazy reporters all the time now, demanding to know, how it is that Brownstone Institute's become supposedly so influential. And I always say the same thing. You can't shut churches all over the world, force everybody to stay home orders, destroy millions of small businesses, impose travel restrictions between states, and do it all over the world at the same time, and then follow that up by the forced injection of an experimental technology that had not been ever tested for safety and effectiveness, claiming that this is going to end the pandemic when every virologist in the world knew that that wasn't true. You can't do all this stuff and not expect some blowback, some questions to be asked about how this came to be, and that has spread a great deal of incredulity towards public health, and not just public health, but doctors and the retail outlets at the pharmaceutical companies that participated, for that matter, the churches that shut their doors on Christmas and Easter's, the schools that refused to educate the kids for a year and a half, the bureaucrats who divided us between essential and unessential, the digital companies that participated in a grim, gruesome uh, uh, censorship campaign to the point that they even took the president off social media when he started saying things that were too true. All of this happened to us. And of course, I mean, what did you think was going to happen? People are going to be upset about it. And it's not enough just to say, oh, don't worry about it. That was then, this is now. Everybody just get over it. No, it's permanently affected an entire generation. And we're going to be living with the consequences for the rest of our lives and that of our children too. Nothing will ever be the same after this. And it's just naive and absurd for these media outlets to pretend as if, Brownstone Institute alone somehow generated the public the public anger. I mean, it's absurd. If anything, we're trying to ask the questions that are going to get us the answers we need so that we can get over it, but we can't just pretend like none of this happened. It was like the equivalent of World War One, I think, for this generation. And, you can't just wish that that never happened. It did happen. And we're going to get answers and hopefully some justice. And there's going to be uh, tremendous consequences on the loss of trust in all these institutions, from big tech to universities to churches to government to doctors. Everybody's been affected by it. So it's the most profoundly devastating thing that's ever happened to our country, I would say. At least it compares with World War One and World War Two, and the questions are not going away.
Jeffrey, you mentioned the loss of trust in institutions, and I'm someone who firmly believes all nations are built on their institutions, that you really have to have good ones. If you have good ones, you have a good country. If you have bad ones, you have a bad country. And now we don't trust our institutions now, as you just pointed out. But isn't that in a way a good thing that we finally found out just how sick, demented, and evil so many of our institutions are? Yeah, I want them to be good, but if I can't have good ones, I at least have to know they're bad.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. We shouldn't recoil from the truth. We have to know what the truth is, but the truth is very profoundly disturbing. What we saw unfold before us was conspirators, no question, but then collaborators who did so mostly, as far as I can tell, on grounds of careerism. People didn't want to speak out because they knew that speaking out was going to be injurious to their remunerative flow and ability to pay overextended mortgages, car loans, and cell phone bills. And that alone was enough to control an entire population. I mean, I don't think we want to live this way. Um, I think we place too much of the burden on the handful of courageous truth tellers like yourself, who happen to be in a position to be independent enough to do it, or were willing to take tremendous personal risks to their career. And most of the people who spoke out, especially in the early period, faced terrible consequences for their decisions. Um, and it's nice that okay, now some of these people have jobs in the Trump administration or whatever, but it hardly makes up for having created a conditions under which people had to forego all financial security, all sacrifice professional relationships, friend circles, everything to stand up to do the right thing. That kind of thing should not be necessary. I also agree with you that it's better to know the truth. On the other hand, nobody really wants to live in a world without trust in anything. And that's sort of where we are right now. We are a society without trust. And the evidence of it is all around us. Our commons are being taken away from us, I recently uh, boarded a train to go to Manhattan and got off at the Moynihan's train station. The first thing you notice at Moynihan train station is like while it's pretty, there's no place to sit down, you know? I mean, there's literally they've constructed it without benches. And the reason is that they don't want people loitering. Well, is that really the kind of world we want to live in where you can't have a place to sit down anywhere? And that's all of Manhattan now. You can't, there's hardly any place to sit down. And this contrasts with all the old train stations. Like you look at the New Haven train station in Connecticut, it's nothing but benches. They made it as comfortable as possible for everybody to be there. It almost looks like a church with lined up pews everywhere, you know? That's the difference in 100 years. The old train stations had nothing but places to sit where everybody could be comfortable. New train stations, you dare not even create so much as one bench because it'll be taken over by a homeless person. That's a substantial difference in the kind of world that we live in now. And then you leave the train station and you encounter something like a post-apocalyptic situation. For 5 square blocks in all directions. Um, I've never really wanted to wear a mask during COVID, but I want to wear a mask now when I visit Manhattan because there's three competing smells. There's urine, pot, and trash. Okay. So, and at any one waft, you're not sure which of the three is going to be dominant, you know, but one of those three is going to overtake you and mute the other two, and then it's going to flip 1 block later. um, I was wearing a suit and tie, and I felt like a visitor from another planet or from the Gilded Age or something. Like nobody looked like me. There wasn't a single person wearing a suit or a tie anywhere. They're all just, they're dressed like vagabonds, fentanyl addicts everywhere, bums stepping over trash, construction that's never going to be completed. It's actually feels genuinely unsafe. This is not civilization. I mean, but this is where we are, and it's happened kind of quickly, but a little bit too slowly. But we've accommodated ourselves to this. Same thing is true in San Francisco. I was there recently. I couldn't believe what a catastrophe it was. You know, when I was a kid, I used to visit San Francisco. It was gleaming. This is the greatest city in the world. And now it's just nothing but a catastrophe where anybody there feels free to take up to $1,000 to rob stores of up to $1,000 because they're not going to get prosecuted for it. And human feces is all over the sidewalks. I mean, it's indescribable. I mean, that's sort of where we are as a country. And it's not everywhere, but it's in a lot of places. And the problem is, as far as I can tell, is it's spreading. The COVID response kicked all this off by demoralizing the population and lying just constantly. So it spread a sort of nihilism towards public life where people don't even believe in truth. In fact, our top intellectuals now say this. There's no such thing as truth. Who cares about truth? Truth gets in the way of getting things done. So NPR can be relied upon to lying to you every single day. I talk to reporters at all these top venues all the time, and they don't care about the truth. They're concerned about everything but the truth. They're concerned about keeping the establishment in power as long as possible and stopping people like you and me who want to talk about what's going on.
And we have more for you next. I am a chip freak. I know that there are pretzel people or people who like sweets. You want to sit around and eat candy. Ever since I was a kid, all I wanted were chips. And now I'm 44 and I'm still addicted to chips. It's very clear that I'm going to eat chips till the day I die. The problem is all these chips you buy in the gas station will actually kill you. And so I needed something else. I heard about Massa chips from a friend. I was told only 3 ingredients, so they're so much better for you. So immediately I thought they're going to be disgusting. They're going to be gross like all the other health food. Massa chips are my favorite chips. If everything was equal, I would still eat Massa chips. You don't feel all bloated and horrible after you're done because it's just 3 ingredients. No cancer-causing filth. Go eat chips guilt-free. May I recommend a little dab of hot sauce on there? They have all kinds of flavors. Go to massachips.com/JesseTV. I've never actually asked you on camera because we've always been in more of a rush than we are now, what your background is. Everybody knows Jeffrey Tucker who watches I'm Right, but people don't know your background as well.
Yeah.
Give me the short and skinny on it.
Well, I grew up in a highly musical family, and I thought from a very young age that I was going to be that my highest aspiration was to be a jazz trombonist. And then at the age of 16 or 17, I suddenly occurred to me I could do whatever I wanted. I didn't have to be that. And so I instead, I spent a lot of time playing in dance bands and jazz clubs and that kind of thing to pay my way through school, but I otherwise dropped it as a profession and took up economics because economics as a discipline held out the possibility of understanding the rise and fall of societies, and I wanted to know what that story was. So I fell in love with economics as a discipline, and that's what I studied. And the main thing I learned from economics is that for all the mysteries that are associated with the, the material world, the one thing that seems to fix everything is letting people be free in their actions and choices and secure in their property. So that's the lesson I took from all my studies there. And I thought, well, I would like to go into an industry, an ideas industry that emphasizes these points: freedom in your action and choices, and security in your property. So that's what I've done most of my career, and that took me in a lot of different directions, editorially and technologically, and for-profit and nonprofit industries. My life took a different direction with the COVID response because I had 15 years prior been writing about pandemics and the government response to them. And I wrote an article in 2005 that said, listen, I know there's some people out there who like the idea of lockdowns and putting government in charge of pandemics. If you ever attempt this, you will discredit government for forever. It won't work, and it'll be a cultural, social, economic calamity. That's what I wrote in 2005. I never expected they would ever attempt this, but then in January of 2020, I began to think this was getting more real. In February, I began to think it was even more real. The day when I realized that it was all coming was February 27th. And that was the first day when the New York Times ran a podcast where they were trying to panic the population over the coming bug, the virus. And this contradicted 100 years of New York Times reporting on pandemics, which is always about stay calm, see your doctor if you get sick. This time they were actively promoting panic, and I knew for sure that there was a reason for that. And then, within 2 weeks, it was a done deal, and we were off trying the lockdown technique. The one piece of it I never really anticipated was that the whole purpose of the lockdown was to prepare the population for the deployment of a new shot technology, namely modified mRNA. Uh, that is something I didn't really believe that they would attempt something like that because just on the face of it, there's no way you can have a vaccine for fast mutating pathogen like this with a zoonotic reservoir. It just wasn't even plausible, wasn't even believable. And I knew for sure it was going to make things worse, and that it wouldn't work ultimately. And that's what they tried. And now, even in that framework, uh, I didn't anticipate how dangerous the shots would be. That was the part that um, really shocked me. And I wasn't even a believer in it for a long time until the evidence just overwhelmed me. But that put me in a position of starting Brownstone as a kind of a voice for uh, resisting this kind of dictatorship by public health authorities and investigating all the ways in which this unfolded. And it's left Brownstone a little bit in a position of being unique because not other institutions continue to ask these questions, but at Brownstone we do. And it also has made us, of course, a target, as you well know.
Mm. Hmm. Jeffrey, kind of a large question, like a 30,000 foot view question, but just hearing you talk about this, I find it curious. We are supposed to live in a constitutional republic, a representative republic. And we have all these things that I shouldn't say nobody likes, but the vast majority of people don't want. The vast majority of people don't want New York without benches and smelling like pee. The vast majority of people don't want their schools shut down. The vast majority of people don't want homeless people everywhere, criminals everywhere, border open. Okay, but we got all that. So we live in a constitutional republic. The vast majority of people don't want what we have in so many areas. How does that happen?
Yeah, it has to do with the vast enterprise we call the state, which is not just the government, but it's all the tentacles of the state, which are reaching into all of our industries and agriculture and pharmaceuticals and banking, our doctors' offices. Everything is impacted by these enormous networks that have been created by the agencies that are running everything. And the agencies all represent industries. This system that we inhabit today was built over a little more than 100 years, really. It finds its origin in the 1880s, but it really came of age about 1913 with the income tax and the direct election of senators, and then World War One. And ever since then, we've lived in this sort of managerial empire run by the expert classes on whom we never voted in the first place. We found ourselves in this strange situation where we can't get rid of them. Um, the thing that makes the Trump administration unique is that I think it's the first president we've had in 100 years that's absolutely determined to be in charge, which is a strange thing to say. But mostly presidents have just acquiesced. And he's appointed a lot of people who themselves want to be in charge. And the agencies are not used to this. They've long been used to just having marionettes come and go. Yeah, here's your nice parking place, here's your sweet office, but otherwise leave us alone and you'll be gone in a few years. That's the way the agencies have always worked. This time it's different. These guys really want to be in charge. Um, I'll tell you, just earlier today, I was being asked a question by a reporter. I know I shouldn't give these interviews, and I'm going to try not to anymore. But
Hmm.
the question was, well, what's it like for you and all your associates? Because you used to be the dissidents just a year ago, but now you guys are in charge of everything. And I said, I'm not even going to accept the premise of the question because I'm not sure that we are in charge of anything. I know that some very important positions are now occupied by people like, RFK and Jay Bhattacharya, and you could go down the list, and there's dozens of them. But are they really in charge? Yeah, in name, but they're battling immense beasts of such reach and so well funded. And these guys are just all appointees, easily ignored by systems that run by themselves, by bureaucrats with all the institutional knowledge, and by industries who know their way around very, very well. They are the masters at managing this world of power. Our people are just getting going. So I don't really accept the idea that we're really in charge. For that matter, Trump struggles every day. It's interesting. His first term, he just naturally assumed that he would be the CEO of the government and that what he said would go. He found out otherwise very quickly that the executive agencies were in a plot with industry and the deep state to uh, drive him out of office, to disable him, to humiliate him, to make sure he never came back again, as a way of sending the message to anybody who thinks that democracy works, that no, democracy does not work. The voters will not get their way. The establishment will rule forever. And to their shock and amazement, he came back after 4 years, despite assassination attempts and endless lawsuits trying to bankrupt him, send him to jail. They've tried everything, and now he's trying to make the second term really count. Um, he's not going as fast on many areas as I would wish, but it's probably the first presidential administration in my lifetime that's made any kind of difference at all. And a lot of it traces to the Russiagate thing, but also the COVID response traces looms very large in this administration. That was entirely a deep state industrial scheme, yeah, and and Trump wants to reverse that, or at least disable the institutions that made that happen, or otherwise bamboozled him into acquiescing to it, or giving him no choice, essentially. So we're living in unprecedented times. We're really trying to figure out right now whether this thing we call democracy, whether this thing we call this constitutional republic in which the people rule, whether it's real, whether it can be made real again, or else are we just going to live in a fictitious world where we pretend to have those institutions while really the insiders run everything, the industries run everything. That's the great test of our time, and I don't know how it's going to turn out, but I admire at least the attempt to make the founders' vision um, something meaningful in our lives.
Stay tuned. We have more coming up next. Let me tell you about energy. Feeling good all the time. Feeling good in the morning when you wake up. Feeling energized, ready to take on the day. At work, not sitting there staring at the clock. Get me another cup of coffee. When you get home, don't you want to enjoy your family, your time to yourself? You want to go shooting, go for a walk? Get your T levels up. You can't walk through your life being low T and tired and depressed all the time. That's no way to live. We are drinking estrogen. It's in the birth control. We can't get it out of the water. It's in the we shower in estrogen. We have lost half of our testosterone in the last 50 years. That's societal extinction if we don't turn it around. Chalk is trying to turn it around with natural herbal supplements. 20% increase in your T levels in 90 days. Just try it. You're 3 months away from feeling like a new person. Chalk.com/JesseTV. Jeffrey, we're going to actually not really switch gears here because it's really along the lines of what we've been talking about, a particular area of your expertise that people find very confusing is the Federal Reserve.
Mm-hmm.
What is it? Why do they have so much immense power? I mean, Trump can't even apparently fire someone from there with that.
Yeah.
But who do they answer to? Tell us about the Federal Reserve.
Yeah, well, nobody really knows. That's what's funny about it. We created this thing in 1913. We called it Federal Reserve, but it really was just a central bank. I mean, it's a funny word, Federal Reserve. Federal meaning, oh, it's just like a federal thing. Like, We have a federal system, so this is our federal thing. And then the reserve part, as if to say that, there's it's just there in case we need it, this is where all the gold is. There are the people who are going to make the system run, called the Federal Reserve, established branches all over the country to, create the appearance of decentralization. And but it was never really figured out whether who would run it. Was the president in charge of it? Yes, it's an executive agency. It's called the Federal Reserve.gov. So it lives under the government and under the org chart of the federal government. It reports to the president, meaning that if the voters vote a new president in, he should have some uh, authority over what it does. You'd think just by the org chart. But we don't have an answer to that. In fact, this is going to be adjudicated by the Supreme Court at some point. And I don't know how the answer could be anything other than the president's in charge of the Federal Reserve. How could it be otherwise? It is an executive level agency. You can't just say, "Oh, well, the Supreme Court's not." I doubt the Supreme Court is going to say this. The temptation is to say, "Well, Federal Reserve is different. It's an independent agency." Well, there's nothing in the Constitution that says anything about an independent agency. That thing does not exist. If you're actually reading the Constitution, and you care about it. There's no such thing as an independent agency. Every agency of the government is responsible to the people through their elected representatives. That's got to be the case. Now, the other bigger question is whether and to what extent the Federal Reserve has done what it's supposed to do. And the answer on every front is no. You know that one of the original charges, you can't believe it, when they started the Fed, they said they was going to lower inflation. I mean, I mean, I mean, the dollar of 1913 is now worth, I think last I checked, about 2 cents. So, I mean, it's been a disaster, and in the first 5 years after the Fed's existence, the dollar lost, 30-40% of its purchasing power. I mean, it blew up immediately. Instead of taming business cycles, it's created them through its ability to print unlimited quantities of money. And the whole system's gotten much worse since 1974 when we went off any tie of gold forever and instituted a new system where we're just going to have just pure paper money, which in all of human history has always led to tremendous calamity every single time that a system like this has ever been tried. Meanwhile, since that time, we've seen the Fed fundamentally change the industrial structure of the United States. This used to be a country where we made things, through toil and creativity, things that last. We lost one industry after another ever since the dollar became the world reserve currency, and the Fed could just export its inflation abroad. Uh, that any trade theorist of the 1930s or 40s would have predicted exactly what would happen, which is that the industrial base of America would be gutted, and that's exactly what happened. It happened slowly at first, and then all at once. We lost pianos, then we lost watches, then we lost textiles, and then lost steel, and then toys and shipbuilding and tools and you name it. And we just became a country that lives off leverage and silliness. Uh, Thinking that we could live off our credentials and degrees that we pay exorbitant prices for. And that's where we are now. Now we developed an information economy and deconditioned an entire generation into thinking they didn't have to work. Um, so that hard work, and toil are not even part of the lives of people, under the age of 40, really, in general. And then the worst possible thing happened uh, during the COVID period, and that was mandates that everybody stop working and just live off the government. That's that moment where vast swaths of the population began to think this entire system is fake. I'm not working at all, and yet I'm richer than I ever have been. Right? That went on for like 2 years, 3 years. That's a horrible lesson to impart to the population. Of course, the consequence of that was 30%, an additional 30% loss in purchasing power. All the gains that people got from the largesse that was distributed to the population, where the government was just like giving you thousands of dollars in your bank account every month, which is a weird time. Wait, it was all taken away in the form of inflation, and
Ugh.
but left a cultural message that it's all nonsense. There's nothing that's real. And now we have AI, and we have influencer culture, and we have what's that fans thing, only fans, and we have crypto, and it's like the fictional world of the casino fantasy is dominating everything.
We're not done yet. We have even more. Next. I love chips. I'm a chip freak. And now the Spaceball playoffs, it's college football season, my chip intake increases exponentially right now. But I'm 44. I need to start being better about what I eat. I know that. So what do you do though? Who wants healthy chips? They're all gross, right? Nope. Vandy Crisps is there. Vandy Crisps you can eat without any guilt at all. No seed oil filth, no cancer causing stuff, just delicious natural chips. Potatoes, salt, tallow, goodness. Multiple flavors. It is your next potato chip. You'll never need another one. These will be the only potato chips you ever eat. Go to vandycrisps.com/JesseTV. Get yourself a couple bags. So I want to talk about Spirits of America because it makes me feel better. We're going to talk about your book now. Tell me about your book. Tell me why even write this book. Give it to me.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I I wrote two really dark books in a row on the lockdowns. One was called Liberty Lockdown, and the second one was called Life After Lockdown. And they're pretty gritty, pretty grim. And I kind of wanted to shake myself out of it and realize that look, if we're going to rebuild the country, we've got to remember who we are and what are those values that led to it. So I discovered this writer named Eric Sloan who was writing before the bicentennial in the early 1970s. And he wrote a brilliant book called Spirits of 76, and which he divided between, I think it was like ten chapters, where he identified these various traits of what it really means to be an American. Uh, Frugality, hard work, patience, respect for one's neighbors, all these kinds of things that I found myself so whipped up into excitement about the romance of about which he was writing that I tried my hand at updating the book. The foundation that published the book will not bring it back in print because they find it too politically incorrect, I guess you would say. Like it's not a message they want to send. So you'll never be able to get this book. Last time I saw the books were thousands of dollars online, but now you can't even get them anymore. So I decided to just update the book for myself and just kind of relay to readers what he was saying. And then I added a few additional chapters about other subjects like forbearance and some other matters that I discussed in the book. It's not a big book. I think it's about 100 pages maybe, but I commissioned special drawings for it, pen and ink, So there's a nostalgia, I would say, to the book, and I think everybody's feeling a little bit nostalgic these days. So the book hit at exactly the right time. Like, who are we? Where do we come from? What do we really believe as Americans? And what kind of values do we need to have if we want to recapture what it means to be free people in a good society? Yeah. So that's what the book is about. It really helped me to write it, and I have to say I'm more proud of this book than anything I've ever written. I feel really good about it. I know this because I'm always rereading it all the time. I pick it up and reread it, especially the lessons in there about time and patience. There's some really important material in this book, and I don't know. It came about at the right time. But meanwhile, and of course, the reason for the book is to celebrate the semi-quincentennial that's coming up next year, right? But meanwhile, it turns out that in our media culture today, it, you probably know this already, but it's even controversial to say that America has a heritage or that there are spirits that animate this country or that we have habits and folkways uh, that are worth emulating from our ancestors. I mean, I just read an article from the New York Times that appeared, I think, this morning that denies all this. Oh, America's never had, we don't have a heritage, we don't have a history, we're not a certain people, we don't, there's nothing, distinct about this country. It's always just been nonstop chaos from the very beginning, and so it's uh, it's mean, nasty, racist, and nativist to assert otherwise. I thought, wow, I wonder what this journalist would think about my book because the thesis that I'm arguing here is exactly the opposite. That this country was forged through family relationships of particular people confronting particular um, frontier conditions and cultivated for ourselves certain value systems that we need to recapture before we lose everything entirely. That's the thesis of the book.
Can we've only got about 3 minutes left here. Can we recapture it? I know we're angry with what we have, but that doesn't mean
Yeah,
we can return to what we were. Is that
yeah.
possible?
Of course, I wonder about this question every day. I'm very concerned about what we're doing with AI and the digitization of our lives. I just finished an article uh, calling out the fragility of these systems we've created without any kind of redundancy. Yeah, when the servers go down, we won't be able to get, we won't be able to start our cars. We won't be able to get into our homes. We won't be able to answer the door. We won't be able to pay our bills. Um, can't get money. We won't be able to heat our homes. Like we've built uh, all of these digital systems have been built on such a fragile foundation. It worries me because outages are increasing, and they're always shocking us all the time. But they shouldn't shock us. We move way too quickly to abandon the analog world and embrace the digital one. I My concern is that it's all going to at some point collapse in a way that's going to be very ugly for us, and that we need to get better at preparing, not just in terms of rejecting digital technology when possible. I always choose analog technology before embracing the digital, and like never scan a QR code at a restaurant to order. I'm just saying, like as a matter of principle, never do that. Demand a physical menu. If they're not going to give you one, then just ask them what they have to eat. Look, let's just please dial this back a little bit. But the much more important thing is figuring out, who we are as a people and a way of making our own character and our own personalities more robust to resist the insidious ways in which all the systems around us are trying to make us dependent upon them by fostering a sort of a weird sort of persistent dissatisfaction with everything about our lives. So we should stop resenting work and instead thrill that we have the opportunity to work. Not always get mad when things break, but see it as a chance to show that we can do something and still can control our lives by fixing things ourselves. Uh, Fostering community. I mean, one of the things that Brownstone Institute is doing is we started supper clubs around the country, so that our communities that have been shattered by COVID can reconstitute under a different value system, a love of freedom and free speech and a genuine community exchange. I think these are some of the most valuable things we can do, reassembling friend networks and preparing for the worst. My big concern right in the most immediate term is that we're going to face a second wave of inflation after this first one, and then a third wave after that. And if that happens, then the money will, could die. What happens in a society where the money dies? terrible things happen. So we need to prepare for the worst. And part of that preparation is not just choosing analog over digital whenever possible, but it's also preparing our own sense of ourselves, our jobs, our devotion to our communities and our families, and to our faith. That is the cornerstone of that which will get us through the crisis, but it also is the basis of a rebuilding that's necessarily going to happen. Can it happen? I believe I was talking to Steve Banner early on when all this was unfolding. And Steve's a very interesting guy. And he said to me, what man has built, man can take apart again and rebuild. There's no systems that are impervious to this. And I've thought about that remark a lot. And I think it has to be true. You know, we're being acculturated to believe that we don't have control, but we do have control. Let's cling to the control we do have, so that when the time comes, we're in a position to rebuild this country on a foundation of constitutional government, individual rights, and freedom. And that opportunity, I believe, is upon us right now to do it. And there's things in everybody's lives that everyone can do to help achieve this dream.
I agree. Jeffrey, that was spectacular. We finally got to have you for an hour. I appreciate you so much, my friend. Come back soon, please. All right. Final thoughts. Next. We've been wanting to do that for a very long time. A tremendously interesting guy. And yeah, we have all these problems, all these things we have to patch back together. But just remember, we can. We just have to begin. Get to know your neighbor. Put the phone down. All right? All right, we'll do it again.